Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to our Mummy MOT webinar tonight. And we have some great speakers, and we're going to discuss postnatal nutrition and how important it is for you as a mum recovering. My name's Maria Elliott. I'm a specialist pelvic health physio based in London, and I'm the founder of Mummy MOT. Actually, I've just finished clinic, and it's all been a bit hectic and busy, and great that we're all here tonight now for the webinar. So I'd like to introduce you to Kathryn, Elrina, and Dalia. So I'm going to hand over to Kathryn, who's based up in Cambridge and was involved in our webinar last year. Good evening, Kathryn.
Hello. Right, so thank you. Yes, of course. So my name is Kathryn, and I am a pelvic health physiotherapist, and I'm based in Cambridge. I am also a Mummy MOT practitioner, and I am the owner of Prima Women's Health. Now, tonight we have two wonderful guest speakers, and we are going to be deep diving on all things nutrition and optimizing nutrition in the postpartum period. Now, postpartum depletion is very real. It is very all-consuming, and how we nourish our bodies is really vital to our recovery, but how to do it in the safe and most thoughtful way is not always that obvious. So hopefully there'll be some clarity after our discussion this evening. So our first speaker is Elrina Pretorius, who is all things physio. She is a pelvic health physio and MSK physio, and she's going to be talking about nutrition more through the traditional Chinese medicine lens. And then we have Dalia Weinreb, who is a registered dietitian who is local to me here in Cambridge, but she runs all of her clinics virtually. We actually met many, many years ago when she came in for her Mummy MOT, and we have been collaborating together ever since. And she's going to be looking through it more of the clinical nutrition, looking at metabolism and behaviors. So after that, we're going to have a fireside chat. I'm going to answer all the questions, or as many questions as we can. Please feel free to put them into the Q&A box, and we will address them at the end of the webinar. And other than that, I'm going to hand it over to Elrina.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I'm also always really grateful to be asked by Mummy MOT to help educate mums and fellow practitioners. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a physio for almost 30 years, and I fell in love with traditional Chinese medicine quite early on in my career, about 25 years ago, because I love the simplicity of the approach, the connectedness, the interconnectedness within our bodies, as well as the environment around us. And then I had some personal health challenges that brought me to the world of nutrition and lifestyle medicine. And I was able to reverse and stay in remission with my own health condition for the last 11 years. And that's made me really passionate about sharing with my patients just how much power they hold by just making some changes to their diet, their mindset, the amount they move, and how well they sleep. So let's have a quick look at our agenda for this evening. We're going to be looking at what goes wrong in postnatal nutrition, as well as particularly looking at nutrition from a Chinese medicine perspective, the earth and the 5 elements that are incorporated into that, and then also what we can do about this when things do go wrong. And then Dalia will expand a little bit on the details and the more specific nutrients that go missing in this population, also how to easily incorporate them into our diets. So let's define what we're talking about tonight. You know, the word nurture means to provide food and other substances necessary for growth, health, and good condition. And the word mother means to bring up with care and affection. So the little definition I found online here, so true, is a selfless, loving human who must sacrifice many of their needs and wants for the needs and wants of their children. So that's all too true, because motherhood is a time of significant sacrifice. But we must guard against getting depleted, because that serves absolutely no one. It costs your own health, and it really is a long-term effect on the health of your child as well. And then also the family at large and then society at large are impacted by those health issues that crop up for mums. So we talk about the 4th trimester, often the first 3 months postnatally, but I think really the first year and even up to 2 years postnatally. And we're looking at what it takes for that period to be a positive time for mums. And we're looking at the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. But what we mean by that is that we support the mother. And at Mummy MOT, we talk about taking care of you so you can take care of your baby, which I absolutely love, because if mums are not supported, that has an impact throughout society. And in some societies, mums are very, very well looked after. They'll come home, they'll have their abdomen bound to get their organs supported. They'll have pelvic compresses if they've had any pelvic trauma. They'll be fed nutritious foods like bone broths. They'll have ample rest. Baby will be brought to them to be fed. But actually, that is not the reality for most of us. It sounds like a bit of a dream. So in our society, mums are really vulnerable, often undernourished and sleep deprived. And this is often due to blood loss, to trauma, both physical and mental postnatally, a lack of support from their partner or even their family, maybe struggling to adjust to new routine changes in routine, and the harsh, cold reality check of what you expected, cuddling with your baby and your husband in bed, and instead you've got a screaming colicky baby, and you and your husband are whisper screaming at each other and totally sleep deprived. So it's no wonder that it feels quite hard to prioritize self-care at this point. But the problem is that if we don't prioritize, the long-term impact on our health is significant, but also the impact of the health of your child, because it'll take you longer to heal. You'll have hormone imbalances that will create havoc with your mood and your healing. And if you had a prenatal condition like gestational diabetes or preeclamptic toxemia, you could well end up having those problems again later in life if we don't get that proper healing in the early days. And another scary statistics here is that 1 in 3 women suffer from postnatal depression or anxiety. And this is so often linked to nutritional deficiencies in that postnatal population, and so easily corrected once we know what's going on for a mom. But Dalia will talk more about that a little bit later. So something I'd like to mention here is that in my personal life, I did not take charge of my health until my son got diagnosed with the same condition. So then I suddenly found the time, the money, the energy to go and do everything I needed to do to get better, because I didn't want him to have those problems. So if that's your driver, looking at the health of your child, let that be your driver. So how are we coping at the moment? Most mums will say they're existing on cups of tea and coffee and lots of biscuits and sugary snacks through the day, anything they can kind of pop in their face as quickly and easily as possible. And then, of course, there'll be weight gain. And then they'll start eating raw foods like salads, which are really hard to digest, or join a mummy boot camp style workout thing, which causes stress hormones in the body, and then that impacts your estrogen as well. So none of those are going to leave you functioning or feeling better. Right, so let's have a quick look at the 5 elements. This is the Chinese model of health and just pretty much of how they view the world. So we look at these different things and how they relate to each other. For instance, water will nourish wood. Wood will give us fire. Fire will burn down into ashes and give us earth. And then we mine the earth to get metal. But that's the kind of building cycle. But we also have this destructive cycle internally, where earth will dam up water. Water will put out fire. Fire will melt metal. Metal will chop wood, and wood will break the earth. If you think of the roots of a tree. So we're specifically aiming on the earth element tonight, because that is the one that is associated with nurture and also with the mother energy. Now, we all know that earth mother, she's making bone broth from scratch while she's breastfeeding her baby. She's got a rosy cheeked toddler running around the kitchen, and it all looks just wonderful. The rest of us just have to do the best we can, right? But even the earth mother can get depleted if she's not nourishing herself and looking after herself. So let's have a quick look at what that earth element looks at. Every element is governing a couple of organs in the body, and the earth specifically governs the stomach and the spleen, and also the pancreas, which is the bit that brings in the insulin, getting the food transported to where it needs to go. So quite obviously, this is connected with nourishment and digestion, absorption, even metabolism and immunity. If you think of how quickly you'll get sick if you're not well nourished, everybody's experienced that. And due to this nourishment of the body, it creates in the soft tissues, it creates structure in the body, it feeds the soft tissues, so you have muscle tone, and it also governs the flow of blood to make sure blood stays in the places, in the pathways it belongs. And then another interesting thought that the Chinese have is this, that the stomach and spleen, or the earth, houses the power of thought and concentration. Now, if you've ever had a really carb-heavy lunch and had a carb coma afterwards where you can't concentrate or stay awake, you know what I'm talking about. But it also shows up in our language in terms of things like food for thought or verbal diarrhea or unable to digest information. And we all understand that inability to eat when you're really super stressed. So we can see that link between thought, concentration, and that digestive element. So what are the challenges to the earth element? Now look at this and see if there's any of this showing up for you at the moment. You know, are there lots of raw foods and cold drinks in your diet? These are really hard to digest and put a strain on the digestive system. Sugary processed foods, poor eating habits like eating on the go, eating late at night, not having a routine around what you eat, high stress levels or really worrying about things a lot, cold and damp environments, which unfortunately, if you're not about to move away from the UK, you can't make any difference to. But what you can do is make sure that your own home environment is warm and dry. And then the Chinese have this concept of damp as a pathogen, which means it's damaging to the body, and they feel that dairy products can be quite mucus producing, and that damp is this mucus that slows down everything, makes us feel really sluggish in our thoughts and in our movement, and in just how the body functions altogether. So this is what Earth looks like when it's depleted. So look and see if you can recognize yourself here. These, when I show patients this, they'll often say to me, I've described them to a T, and I'm not just talking about my postnatal patients, many people, but this tired all the time, you know, digestive issues like bloating, constipation, diarrhea or heartburn, sugar cravings, cognitive fogginess, which just can't concentrate, and then also poor posture and pelvic floor dysfunction. And those two things go quite closely together, because when the muscle tone isn't governed well by the spleen and the stomach, those muscles in the pelvic floor are also weak. And you end up with things like pelvic organ prolapse or even incontinence or pain. So they're all connected with that tone of the muscles. And then allergies can show up with this excessive mucus production. We talked about the damp in the last slide. There can be difficulty with weight control, not just necessarily not being able to lose weight, some mums simply not being able to gain it. Easily bruising, you know, basically walk past the door and it shows up on your leg. And then also heavy bleeding or menstrual irregularities like excessive bleeding postnatally, but also periods that are irregular and don't show up when they should. The other thing that isn't on here is shallow breathing. So I often see this in mums where they're breathing really and very much in the upper chest, and that is part of that depleted earth as well. And that causes us to be in fight and flight, so we feel anxious all the time, and that's not great. Right, so let's quickly see what you can do about it. How can you specifically support this element through food? Now, for the most part, you want to make sure that you're avoiding raw food. It's hard to digest, and you want to make sure your food is well cooked. So you're thinking soups and stews and porridges, and you want to think of your root vegetables, things that are really nutrient dense. Root vegetables and grains are brilliant, and you want to think of things that are naturally sweet: your beetroot, your sweet potato, your carrots, your onions, pumpkins, squashes, red lentils, things that are naturally soft and easy to digest once you've cooked them. And then also your cruciferous vegetables are really important because they help to maintain a hormone balance, specifically things like broccoli, kale, cabbage. That's very good, will help you to maintain that. Now, when you're eating this way, there'll be loads of fiber in your diet anyway, so you don't have to touch too much on that. You make sure there's a soluble and insoluble fiber there. One is to bulk up the stools and ease your transit, to avoid those hemorrhoids and constipation. And the other one is to help that microbiome, so it will give you some good mental health and also boost your immunity with loads of other things as well. Now, one of the sort of shopping tips I give my patients when they're going to look to what foods to buy is to look for color. The darker the better, the more colorful the better. So instead of a white potato, swap it out for a sweet potato. Instead of a pale white cabbage, go for the Savoy cabbage or kale. Instead of an iceberg lettuce, go for rocket or pea greens or pea shoots or watercress. And you'll see a theme here: instead of white onion, go for red onion. And the theme here is to avoid beige food. If it's beige, it probably doesn't have a major nutritional punch to it. And the wonderful thing is once you've put these things into soups and stews, they also go down to less volume. So it's much easier to get quite a lot of nutrition into yourself without having to eat massive volumes of food when you're struggling. The next thing to look at here is protein. And Dalia and I have just had a little chat before we started here tonight. Most of my patients look at me like I'm a bit mad when I ask them to up their protein to the levels we're looking at, between 70 and 100 grams. But you want to build up to that and see if you can get more protein into your diet, just to aid your tissues healing, but also to help your hormone balance, which is really something that's needed postnatally. So this is your eggs, your meat, your chicken, your fish, your legumes, making sure that there's a lot of mixture there, but also just a little note on fish. The smaller, the better. You know, if you're looking at your sardines, your pilchards, mackerel, sea bass, instead of large fishes like tuna, because the longer the fish has been in the ocean, the more contaminated it has become. So even though tuna is a nice, easy go-to for lunch, don't make that your standard lunch, because it is full of toxic chemicals as well. And then the most all-important water, brilliant, obviously, when you're breastfeeding. An interesting thing to think about here is that most of us are probably more dehydrated in winter than we are in summer, because our houses are warmer in winter than they are in summer. And specifically postnatally, you're trying to keep your house nice and warm for your baby, aren't you? So you're probably more dehydrated than you would be in summer, but you'd be less likely to drink water because you're cold. You'd be grabbing cups of tea and coffee. So make sure you get that water in you. One of my favorite little tools here is something called an incremental water bottle that has the time stamped on the side of the bottle. So, you know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the day. So you can see that you're sipping through the day rather than having a whole pint and cold pint once or twice a day. Just make sure you're sipping, a bit like you'd, you know, feed a dry pot plant, instead of just chucking a load of water in there, bits at a time, and preferably at room temperature. And I really like a nice warm glass of water first thing in the morning with a slice of lemon in it, just to kind of be kind to your digestive system once you get going in the morning. And then just things like resting and digesting when you're eating, trying not to eat on the go or in different routines. Good posture when you're eating so that your organs are nicely positioned to actually do their job, and that can also be really helpful. So what are other ways that you can support the earth element? Cuddles, touch, hugs. That's really super important. So you've got a baby, there's something to cuddle, you've got a husband, you might have some pets. That touch is really important. Self-massage is something I often prescribe for my patients, like the belly massage to help for digestion is really good. But also, you know, being a mum's hard work. You know, it's something like going to the gym 24 hours a day. You're lifting up and bending over and picking up stuff the whole day long with very little break. So you often find that your upper back will get tight from that sitting with the baby, or that lower back will get tight from bending over and lifting and so on. So I think important to actually schedule some massage for yourself to make sure that your back stays nice and mobile. And then coming from mobility point of view, looking at stretching, front of the body to get those pecs open, back of the body to get yourself nice and supple. That's really important also to get blood into the muscles and keep that muscle tone. That's so important for the earth element. But I think a good prescription here would be something like a postnatal mum's yoga class, which can be really you building your tribe, meeting those other mums, so that you guys can start supporting each other as well. And I know Mummy MOT has a YouTube channel with loads of exercise on there, so that are safe postnatally, so that's a good call as well. And then don't forget routine. If you think of earth as an element, it provides structure, and having some structure to your day can be really helpful for you not to feel like you're losing the plot. So just making sure that you create a little bit of structure. We're not aiming for perfect here, but just some structure. And then last but not least, grounding. Now, the best way for me to ground is with a good old belly breath. Now, send that breath right down into the body and ground yourself. So first of all, grounding into yourself. And even as little as 3 minutes of a belly breathing can really drop your stress hormones and make a difference to your day. So if you can incorporate a few of those during the day, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed and exhausted, that can be really helpful. But also grounding in terms of going out to nature, and going for those long walks, and really connecting, not being on your phone and distracted, but actually connecting with, you know, feeling the wind on your face and seeing the trees, listen to the wind in the trees, feel the ground underfoot, and even walk barefoot if you can tolerate the frostbite at the moment, will be helpful. So you might be thinking, how on earth am I supposed to manage all of this postnatally? First and foremost, build that tribe, ask for help. Friends and family are often really willing and able to help if you just ask, but mums often feel like it's a failure if they're asking for help. They feel like they should be able to do it on their own, which is not true. I can't tell you how many mums I think that everybody else has got it sorted, but they the failure, and that's not true. If mums were more honest with each other about how they're struggling, this would be super helpful for them to have. If you're having a really good day, you can support a mum who isn't having a great day, and vice versa. Also, making sure you prepare. So if you have some maternity leave and you've got some time, start batch cooking, get things in the freezer. I really love those little Ziploc bags that don't leak, and you put your soups and stews in there, but they take virtually no space in the freezer. And if you are cooking, double up, so you've got enough for another night, because it doesn't take much more effort to cook an extra batch of bolognese, an extra bit of stew or soup, but it really does save you time on another day when baby's been a bit more cranky. And then at your baby shower, think of requesting things like a food subscription, or a pressure cooker, or a slow cooker, or even a food processor, anything that's going to make your life a little bit easier food-wise postnatally. And then obviously you can just cheat, get your favorite restaurants to make a larger portion of your favorite food and stick that in the freezer. I'm a big fan of things like, Cook and these places that do these big meals that you can just chop up into smaller bits. So that's it for me. A whistle-stop 2 or 3 earth elements and what you can do to support it, what goes wrong in that 4th trimester. And I'll hand over to Dalia now so she can delve more a little bit into the specific nutrients. And I know she's the queen of the hack of getting things more manageable postnatally. I hope you found that informative, and thank you so much for taking the time out to join us here tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. Thank you, Elrina, for such a wonderful talk. I'm just going to share my screen. One moment. Can everybody see that? I hope so.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. I'm really excited to dive into speaking about postpartum nutrition, which is a very, very big passion of mine. Like Kathryn said, I've treated hundreds of women after having babies, and I myself have had 3 children, and it's a really important time in a woman's life. So I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda and talk through what it is I'm going to be speaking about this evening. And I really, really hope that it's going to give you all a lot of help, whether you're practitioners or mothers. So first section, nutrition education, I'll be running through the nutrients and requirements and facts around postpartum nutrition and breastfeeding. And then I'll link into the main big asks that a lot of mothers have around postpartum nutrition, which is around metabolism, nutrition support, so weight loss, constipation, and postnatal depression. And then we'll go into the section on what I personally call anchors, the things you can hang on to behaviorally to get you through and up in this really crucial time in your life. So a little introduction about me. I've been in clinical practice for 15 years. It just gets better and better. And in that time, I've also given birth to 3 children and breastfed each one for 2 years. So I know what it's like to be on the edge, and I know what it's like to be depleted. And you learn a lot along the way. And I'm really pleased to be speaking tonight to both practitioners in the field and also to almost mothers or soon to be mothers and people who have recently given birth, or even if you gave birth a few years ago, you are always postpartum. And some women can sit in deficiencies for years if they've not been properly taken care of. And unfortunately, we have many women who've not had the proper care that they deserve. So like I said, it's a really intense time. And before I dive into the nutrition, I really just want to point out that nutrition can be a double-edged sword when it comes to using it as a tool. If you have a history of perfectionism, if you have had a history of disordered eating, it's really, really important to take everything that I'm saying in a gradual, step-by-step way. There's no such thing as perfect in nutrition. Nutrition is tremendously difficult to implement for so many reasons because there are so many variables. So being compassionate with yourself and being constructive and taking it step by step is the most important thing. So I really want everyone to make a promise that they're going to take my advice in small, doable bites. So we're going to start with vitamin D, which we hear a lot about in the media. And it is an incredibly important and special nutrient. It's produced in our body actually by sunlight, and it's vital for the function of at least 20% of our genes. And we want our genes working for us, because when they don't, disease begins. What's important to understand is here in the UK, we only have the right UVB rays to produce vitamin D between the end of May and the end of September. So all that time in between, you're not going to be making any vitamin D. Even if you're going out on a sunny winter day, which is really, really important for your circadian rhythm and your neurology and your mood hormones, you're not going to be making vitamin D. And along with many other nutrients, the GPs in this country, unfortunately, are not necessarily that reliable about testing your vitamin D and making sure that yours is enough. So you can test it privately if you want, or if you have a GP who's willing to, but you're not going to do yourself any damage by supplementing with at least 1,000 to 3,000 international units of vitamin D3 per day. Really important to have sufficient vitamin D levels for you and your baby, especially if you're breastfeeding, to ensure the adequate absorption of both calcium and phosphorus actually from the gut. Without those, our bones suffer and our nerves. Iron is a crucially important nutrient, and we have epidemic levels of women being deficient. If you do not have enough iron, you cannot make good hemoglobin, and without good hemoglobin, you literally cannot carry oxygen that you breathe in to all your cells, which makes you feel absolutely rubbish. You have symptoms, ranging from anxiety all the way through to hair loss, brittle nails, rough skin, low mood, you name it. GPs, unfortunately, again, are not well trained in iron status of women. It's really important you get your hemoglobin and your ferritin checked, and your ferritin must be above 75 in order to be considered adequate. When you get blood test results, you will see that anything above 10, according to lab values, is considered okay. And many women are told that they're fine when they know they're not fine. So please do get your blood tests done, and please check yourself or give them to a good practitioner to make sure that their ferritin especially is above 75. If you don't have good levels of iron, your thyroid is going to suffer. And the thyroid you're going to see throughout this presentation is a very vulnerable part of a woman's body, particularly in the postpartum period. If your iron is low, you need to supplement, and you can buy for a few pounds over the counter in pharmacists. You can buy ferrous fumarate, which is the most gentle one on the gut. And if you take 210 milligrams or 322 milligrams every other day on an empty tummy, 2 hours away from caffeine or dairy, you will hopefully sufficiently restore. How will you check that? You need to get a blood test again 3 months later. If your levels have not lifted very much, which is actually quite common, not everybody can restore through the gut, then you're going to be thinking about getting an iron infusion. I implore everybody not to sit in iron deficiency. It is damaging in the long term to your whole body, and it also really impacts your mental health. Many women, because they don't tolerate iron supplements, they will just sit in their anemia. Don't do that to yourself, please. This is really important. Omega-3 fatty acids are essential fats in the human diet, and in nutrition we use the word essential when we mean that we cannot synthesize that product ourselves. So we need to take it in through diet, and the main fatty acids that we're interested in are the EPA and the DHA. That's found in oily fish as the main dietary source, because the fish eat the greens in the sea, and they actually originally originate from the cell walls of plants. In a vegan diet, you can get ALA as a plant source that the body can convert over to omega-3, but it's not that easy. GPs will not be able to test your omega-3 status, but there are private tests available if you're interested to know how deficient you are. Without omega-3 fatty acids, our body cannot work properly. They're a crucial part of the human diet for preventing inflammation, regulating your hormones, for preventing cardiovascular disease, which is still the primary killer, preventing arthritis, and also maintaining good memory. With fish, we recommend eating 2 pieces of oily fish a week, not more than that due to, sadly, there are contaminants in the fish now these days. You can supplement looking for one that is high in DHA and EPA and low in other things they put inside. So for example, if you get a capsule that says 1,000 milligrams of omega-3, but you only see 100 or 200 of EPA and DHA, you're then not looking at the greatest product. You want to make sure that most of that 1,000 milligrams is DHA and EPA itself. If you are plant-based, you can take a supplement from algae, or you can make sure that you have these wonderful things that I've listed there in your diet. So all the chia, linseed, and hemp seeds, walnuts, hazelnuts, pecans, of course, the green leafy vegetables, which are abundantly good in many ways for humans, and good old tofu. Now, all the nutrients I've mentioned so far are really important for women, whether they are breastfeeding or not. If you are breastfeeding, you're going to have to give extra attention to your calcium, your iodine, and your selenium. So we've all heard about calcium. There's lots of promotion of it, especially when people my age were growing up. And we know how important calcium is for your bones, along with some other nutrients. If you don't have enough calcium, you do risk fracture and osteoporosis, which is a very difficult condition to deal with. People at the highest risk of calcium deficiency are vegans and people who are dairy-free, people who suffer with inflammatory bowel disease, women who are breastfeeding, and if you're post-menopause or who already have a diagnosis of osteoporosis or osteopenia. Mothers, if you are breastfeeding babies who are cow's milk protein allergic, you also need to be aware of the fact that you've drastically reduced your calcium intake if you dropped dairy products out of your diet. So fortified plant milks and plant products can be extremely helpful. Overall, we know that women who are breastfeeding require 1,250 milligrams of calcium per day, but we don't like supplements to be taken all in one go. You'd want to, if you were to supplement, if you were to decide that your diet is probably not reaching that level of calcium, then you'd want to space your supplements through the day to avoid spiking the calcium in your blood, not forgetting that without enough vitamin D, we cannot absorb our calcium. Make sure your diet is packed with dairy and tofu, pulses, dried fruit fish with edible bones. So there's wonderful canned fish you can keep in the cupboard are excellent for calcium. Iodine, really needed in women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, and it's an essential ingredient for thyroid hormones, which is vital for the growth of the baby, your metabolism, and the development of your baby's brain. Again, main sources, we're looking at dairy and fish. And for vegans, you can use a fortified milk or supplement. And seaweed is an excellent source of iodine. Actually, sometimes it's considered too excellent. So avoid eating seaweed every day. You might overdo the iodine, which has its other problems. We need 200 micrograms a day. And what I always find very sweet and amusing is when I get, young mothers in my clinic and they're upset. They think they're not eating very well because they're stealing their children's fish fingers. And here you can see that haddock and cod are wonderful sources of iodine. So if you're doing that, don't stop. Selenium, again, crucial for the thyroid. So what we're seeing here is a big thyroid theme. And practitioners who are listening tonight, we see so many women with thyroid issues postpartum. Maybe this is why, and this needs to be focused in on. And fatigue being a main symptom is very, very difficult to manage because most new mothers are fatigued. And so what kind of fatigue are we dealing with? Let's cover our bases and make sure we're eating enough selenium. So again, main sources are meats or organ meats, fish, eggs, and whole grains. But Brazil nuts are the heroes of the selenium story because just 1 or 2 per day gives you your entire selenium for the day. Don't overeat Brazil nuts because they can raise your cholesterol when you have too many of them. But if you have that 1 or 2 a day, they're wonderful for you. So jumping into weight loss. This is a big concern for many women who've had babies. They want their body back. How do we do that? Definitely not through crash dieting. It's a very big mistake to click in with any kind of fad out there and try to crash it. Our basal metabolic rate is the first thing we need to understand, that uses up most of our energy. Just keeping our body running. Thermogenesis, which is just making heat for the body, only takes about 10% of our total energy. And then exercise or movement, depending how active you are, you're going to be looking at 10 to 30%. You will not lose weight or get strong in a sustained way if you do not nourish your body. So the first thing to do is to make sure you're eating well in a balanced way. And I'm going to talk about how you do that to drive your basal metabolic rate with lean mass, which means we want to build muscle, but we will never build muscle if we don't eat properly. Make slow and gradual shifts in your diet, because when you starve yourself, which means when you count calories and you do it to too low a point, the starvation actually drops your basal metabolic rate, which means that your body just slows down, including your metabolism. My favorite way to approach the diet is certainly through using the glycemic index, not in a numerical obsessive way, but more understanding that when we don't eat carbohydrates on their own, when we couple them with high quality protein, high quality fat, and lots of fiber, our blood glucose is regulated, and that's good for mental and physical health. What that allows metabolically is to stop you from getting blood glucose spikes, following that an insulin spike, which causes you to crash and also encourages the body to store excessive amounts of fat unnecessarily. Thyroid is also, again, vital when we're thinking about metabolism and weight loss post-birth. If your thyroid has problems after birth, again, extremely common, you might step into an underactive thyroid, which is going to affect your ability to lose weight. If you have weight that indeed needs to be lost, many mothers don't, it comes off by itself. If there's a family history of any autoimmune thyroid issues, push your GP to check your TPO antibodies. They're quite stubborn about this, but it's important. And if they don't do that, then you can get it done privately. But that's a different form of underactive thyroid that needs to be resolved, and nutrition can play a very good role in managing that condition. Your microbiome, the bugs that live in your gut, are crucial for shaping your metabolic rate. We have more and more science on this now. The equation is not as simple as energy in, energy out. I implore people to stop calorie counting and start thinking about nourishing themselves in a really balanced way, because it's not going to have a good impact long-term on your health or your weight. And crash diets are a disaster for physical and mental health. Do not aim to lose more than ½ kilo a week maximum. And if you do find yourself eating a lot of biscuits in a row, try to ask yourself why that happened. Did you not have a proper lunch? Did you not have a proper breakfast? And have you been doing that consistently? Try not to beat yourself up. It's not something to criticize. There's something biochemical going on often. And all those nutrients I mentioned before, if you're in deficiency of any of them, often you'll crave a lot of sugar just to cope, to try and get through the day. Constipation, extremely common and extremely annoying. With constipation, there can be many, many causes, but we want to start with the dietetic basics. And then if those don't work, we're probably looking at a different issue. So everybody should try and meet about 30 grams of fiber per day. You can use an app like NutriCheck to track your food, as long as you don't have an eating disorder. If you have an eating disorder, these apps are not helpful, they're triggering. So you can also look at nutrition labels on the food and count your fiber grams, but a diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables, the wonderful pulses and legumes, whole grains and oat bran they're really helpful for getting your fiber levels up. Seeded oat cakes are also excellent. Hydrate, have at least 2 liters of fluid per day and more if you're breastfeeding, especially in the summer, and be aware of caffeine. Caffeine is a gut irritant, and so it can irritate your gut either into diarrhea or constipation with horrible, painful spasming. So if you're suffering with constipation, consider stopping your caffeine for a little while to see if that helps you. I'll leave the movement to the physiotherapist, just to say that moving enough is extremely important for moving the bowels. It doesn't have to be anything intense. A lovely walk outside, it can be really, really helpful, and getting the right position on the toilet using something called a squatty potty is extremely helpful too. And then looking at supplements that don't harm the bowel, they help the bowel, and you can stay on them long term. So psyllium husk powder comes in capsules, or it comes loose that you can put it in a smoothie, or you can sprinkle it on your cereal. The same thing goes for oat bran, ground flaxseed, and chia seeds. Avoid senna. The GPs can be quite enthusiastic with it. It does damage the bowel over time, and we have many more wonderful things like Movicol that can be helpful. If that still doesn't work, you might be looking at a problem with the microbiome, a dysbiosis, which means an imbalance in gut bacteria. It's very common postpartum. It can be easily fixed if you approach a dietitian like me who specializes in gut health. Postnatal depression is tragically the most common complication of childbirth. And it's triggered by many things, like Elrina pointed out so well, whether a woman has a supportive partner or not, what kind of environment does she have, but also the biochemistry of nutrition. Being deficient in nutrients can really impact your mental health. I cannot express how much. So all the nutrients I mentioned before, super important for keeping in the diet, plus really concentrating and getting enough choline, which is abundant in eggs and chicken and tofu, and just get yourself on a B complex supplement, especially a methylated one if you're struggling with your mental health around having a baby. They really do help. Also, making sure you're managing that blood glucose, like I mentioned in the weight loss section, trying to avoid eating carbs on their own because it spikes you and crashes you, which doesn't make you feel very good. Eating at least 70 grams of protein a day, which requires a huge amount of diligence if you're a vegan. So all vegans listening to this, I strongly recommend you make some appointments with a dietitian to try and get your diet to where it needs to be in terms of the protein, and making sure you don't leave long gaps in between eating when you're feeling vulnerable. At least eating every 3.5 hours, something that contains carbohydrate and protein is going to be really helpful for managing your mood. Don't be stubborn about cooking everything from scratch. It's sometimes not physically possible to do that. I'm going to say more about that on the next slide, but use plan Bs. I'm going to explain what those are in a moment, and make sure that you rest. And that includes mental rest away from things that make you feel bad about yourself, like social media, because it's full of rubbish. What you see there is not the truth. It's not how people are actually doing things. And it really does, like Elrina said, it really does take a village. Please accept help when you're offered it. So anchors. Anchors are the name everyone that works for me in clinic knows that I give to, the behaviors that we employ in order to survive life well using nutrition. So it's also nicknamed in my clinic third, or one of my patients calls it PBC. So third really means if your plate is a third carbohydrate, third protein, third vegetables, you are winning. PVC is protein, veggies, and carbs. So plan A's. Plan A's are what we call, when we're living our idealistic life and we're cooking everything from scratch and we're just winning at it all. We're just succeeding. We're just amazing. I don't know, in my life, I maybe get to plan A 45% of the time. And I feel great about that because, I'm busy. Plan B's, we use some cooking from scratch and we use some, backups from the supermarket. So make sure your cupboards and your fridge and your freezer are full of plan B's as well. So schemes like Mindful Chef or HelloFresh are fantastic. They bring diversity to the diet. You don't have to think about what you're going to cook because a tired mind really doesn't want to be fixating on these things. Pouches of ready cooked grains like quinoa or brown rice, absolutely fantastic. So are the supermarket soups that can be complemented with other things. And supermarket proteins are things like marinated fish that's ready to go in the oven, or already cooked chicken breast or turkey breast or roast beef slices. Don't shy away from these things. If you read the ingredients, you will see it's the same stuff that you'd put in at home. It's super helpful and life-saving, and it makes all the difference between eating too many biscuits because we were stubborn about cooking from scratch, or actually eating something nutritious that's really going to support our physical and mental health. Plan C's, please have all of these in your cupboards and freezers, etc., ready to go. The one thing you can be sure about when you're a mother is that, man plans, God laughs. There's always a lovely surprise around the corner, or not so lovely surprise that you didn't expect to happen. You need to be ready for them. So frozen foods, frozen vegetables, frozen meals. I personally use a company called All Plants. I don't get any commission from them, but they really do help me. I have lovely nutritious meals in the freezer for crazy days, and I love them. Tinned soups, tinned fish, baked beans, all wonderful, and knowing how to do takeaway. Of course, once in a while, it's not a big deal to get a greasy takeaway, but if you're getting takeaway 3 or 4 times a week, we need to talk about how to do that well. So something like sushi or Thai food is often more of the third or PVC type rule than would be, a burger and chips. Survival smoothies are what you make yourself when you really only have 2 minutes. And it can be something like 4 tablespoons of oats, half a banana, some frozen berries, some chia seeds, some protein powder, put some milk in, blend it up, drink it in 2 seconds, and your blood sugar is going to be stable for the next 3 hours. And then, of course, batch cooking for the most organized among us. When you're already cooking in the kitchen, you might as well make double. That's all super helpful to do, but it's going to take some time to implement it because you're on a new path if you're a new mom. So in summary, motherhood is a beautiful storm. You have to be prepared mentally and behaviorally and have your kitchen prepared, but also be prepared to understand that nutrition can be dangerous if misused. So the information can be used as a way to beat yourself up. Look, I should be eating selenium and I should be eating calcium and I'm failing at all of this. Please don't do that. Please take everything that I'm speaking about tonight and understand that if you are a new mother, you're not just raising a baby, you're also raising a new mother. You're raising yourself into that mothering role, and you will get better at it as the years go by. You will get better at your shortcuts. And if we can just approach any so-called failure in nutrition with compassion and ask ourselves, okay, why did you eat that whole pack of biscuits? What happened? Poor you. Then these are the moments that we learn, oh, actually, I'm going to buy in these canned lentil soups just in case of a rainy day. I hope that makes sense. I really want to emphasize again that there's no perfectionism with nutrition. So we're just doing the best that we can because we have to eat so frequently. We can't make it perfect at all. I'm a big fan of supplementing, and I would say if you want to ask about the basic supplements, I think all new mums should be on, it would be an excellent multivitamin, omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin D for sure. Please do ask for help from professionals or friends or family, wherever you need, to make sure that you're taking good care of yourself. And I'm giving you my thanks. Thank you for listening to me this evening.
Okay. All right. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Thank you so much, both of you, Elrina and Dalia, my dear friends. You both did amazing. Ooh. Elrina, you're going to have to unmute yourself so that we can ask you some questions. All right, so we're going to go into, so thank you both so much. We're going to go through some of the questions, and so please feel free to pop them in. You know, we're going to try and do this as best we can, and I think that Dalia and Elrina, you see the Q&As as well, yeah? So we are going to start with Gemma, and she's asked 2 questions, and we'll kind of go in order. So she's commenting on the ferritin levels needing to be above 75, but her question is, what should our hemoglobin be? And she's struggling with her GP to actually get the right blood tests done. And isn't that a common tale? So what would you say about that?
I'll leave this one for Dalia. There you go.
Okay, that's fine. That's just, if anyone can see my face, they can just see that this is something that we deal with day in, day out. I must spend a huge amount of my clinic time writing to GPs and telling them to just do it. I don't sound very nice about it because I'm so upset with what happens with women's health. If her GP absolutely refuses, I would say she's going to need to go private. So Thriver do finger prick tests that you can order to home, which are quite affordable. But I would also say that as soon as she has the energy, she needs to move GPs because her health isn't safe in the hands of that doctor, unfortunately, because it's well established in the NICE guidelines that ferritin should be checked. In terms of hemoglobin, it should be safely in the middle range. So if she's only at 120, for example, she needs to bump that up to 135 or so.
Okay. And yeah, and sorry, I can hear it. So she also then got on to say thyroid, so she doesn't have one. And what would her requirement be post-birth? And again, she's actually had a really hard time with her GP looking at this question. If I'm honest, I'm quite scared to enter postpartum because I've been mismanaged by the GP through cancer diagnosis and recovery and started my first pregnancy. The GP wouldn't even increase my dose when I went in at 4 weeks pregnant and asked if it needed to be increased, and it definitely needs to be increased. At least I thought thyroid medication needs to be increased in pregnancy.
So as far as I know, women who have the thyroid issue or history of thyroid cancer immediately get under the care of an endocrinologist at pregnancy. So this is, I would say it's really important for this patient to go and read the NICE guidelines, her rights and her entitlement. I understand why she feels the way that she does, and that's appalling treatment. And like I said with the original question, this patient isn't safe with this doctor. So she's, you know, the doctor doesn't know what they're doing. And so certainly read the NICE guidelines, understand your rights. But any patient I've had who's had a thyroid issue in pregnancy has been under the care of an endocrinologist. That's your right.
Yeah. It's a really tricky one. That is definitely also, given your history, Gemma, I would say that going to having an endocrinologist is going to be key anyway. Just so that you feel well supported. You shouldn't be scared. It's not a time in life to be scared. There are lots of really skilled providers out there who can help you. It's just finding the right one, and we can help you too, you know, in terms of leading you in the right direction if you sort of send us your postcode. All right, so George, any tips for nutrition when breastfeeding, trying to increase milk supply, and lastly, weaning? So I think we talked a little bit about breastfeeding. What about increasing milk supply? Nutrition and increasing milk supply.
Elrina, did you want this one? I don't mind.
No, it's all you.
Increasing milk supply, please eat plenty of carbohydrates. So really good quality carbohydrates. Oats are fantastic for milk supply, and a nice amount of healthy fats. So you want a nice big bowl of porridge in the morning with nut butter on it, and some nuts and seeds, and you want to make sure you have a nice avocado for a snack mid-morning. And then lunch, you know, a nice plate of rice, good amount of protein and vegetables. But often women's milk supply will struggle a little bit when I don't know if this is the case, but if they're trying to watch what they're eating, and they drop their carbohydrates, it's not a time to drop those if that's the case. So make sure you're getting at least that third plate, but to build milk supply up more, sometimes we're pushing it to half a plate of rice for a little while, a good big sandwich, things like that. Yeah, that kind of.
Any tips for, it's a big one and it's an important one, on a vegan diet, trying to get to that 70 and 100 grams? Oof. How do we do it?
Well, I'll let Dalia answer this, but I really found, even for myself, and I've tried for my patients, you're trying to get that protein at that amount on a vegan diet is really hard. It's really hard. You're going to have to rely on protein powders, vegan protein powders to get you there. I haven't found, unless you want to eat all day long like a chimpanzee, as we said earlier, or an elephant, you know, if you've got 18 hours a day to chew, that's great. But we're talking about, you know, we are short on time, short on energy. So I don't know if Dalia's got any other tips, but I just tend to recommend the vegan protein shakes, lots and lots of pulses. Tofu is brilliant. But there's also, I think even vegan cultures would often have a period of time postnatally where they're actually still feeding their mums bone broths and stuff that are obviously not vegan. So, you know, that comes into play as well. Sorry, Dalia, you're muted.
Sorry. It's a very, very tricky question, actually, because we would say the 70 grams is a minimum requirement. So that's not even taking into account someone's status, whether they had a C-section or not, something like that. That said, you have to have bowels of steel to be able to, you know, consume that level of vegan-based protein, and not get really, really gassy, and also chew for hours every day. A lot of people don't know. For a quick example, you know, if you're going to want to get 25 grams of protein in a meal, you know, one whole can of beans contains about 16 grams of protein. So that's just to give you an idea of just how much you'll be needing to chew and eat. And then if you're filling yourself up on those proteins, it's true that vegan proteins do contain some carbohydrate usually, but your carbohydrate requirements are going to get knocked out because your stomach only has so much capacity, and then your milk supply might drop. Not to mention the fact, you know, vegan proteins come packaged with fiber and so on, which means you don't actually absorb all of the protein from a vegan source as you do from, for example, an egg or a piece of fish. So protein powders, yes, absolutely the way forward. In that situation, tofu and tempeh are amazing in terms of their protein content per bite. So I would, you know, lean on those. I would tell people to avoid the fake chicken, turkey, meat type products because they're highly processed. They're not very healthy. Once in a while is fine, but not as the mainstay. But I don't know if you noticed in my talk, but a lot of the really important nutrients are actually present in animal-based foods. It's tricky. It is a tricky one. It's not impossible, but you'd have to have quite a special microbiome to be able to really nail that one.
And a lot of planning and time. And that's like what none of us have, right? If you have small people in your life, right? All right, next up, can we do some myth busting about this extra calories burning when we're breastfeeding, how much we're supposed to be eating? Can we just kind of clear up the breastfeeding conversation on calories?
Well, like all conversations on calories, it really depends on the person. So this is why, you know, any gym machine that tells you just burnt 400 calories, you don't know that, you know, it's, or I don't know, these almonds contain this amount of calories. Well, that doesn't absorb all of them. We haven't spoken about my digestive system. We haven't spoken about my genes. We haven't spoken about how much stress I'm under right now, how much I slept last night, and so on and so on and so on. So yes, it's true. Women who are breastfeeding in general do have higher calorie requirements. But the numerical number, it's the same thing. The numerical amount, we don't know. We don't know. And it really depends. And it comes into trusting your body and learning about satiety and listening to your appetite. But it's true, for example, if someone's had a history of an eating disorder, their appetite and satiety cues are off. So it's actually quite complicated. I would say, please start with that plate that I described, third, and fill yourself with good snacks. If you feel true hunger in between meals, you probably will need to eat more when you're breastfeeding. I had to eat huge amounts by the time my baby was about 9 months old because I'd lost all the pregnancy weight and I was just starving people. But I have plenty of patients and friends who weren't excessively starving. They needed an extra banana. So we're just all so different.
Yeah. So we're like running out of time, but we're going to try and get to these last two if we can. So the question is about, commenting on how gut health and thyroid are affected so badly in postpartum. And is there anything that you can do to optimize, I guess, thyroid health in pregnancy?
So concentrate on those nutrients that I mentioned tonight. Get your iron status checked while you're pregnant.
Definitely.
Store it while you're pregnant. That will also help to prevent postpartum hemorrhage, which is horrendous.
Yeah.
If your ferritin is low, you're more at risk of that. So get that sorted, and then chuck in those Brazil nuts. Try and eat some fish fingers. I'm not saying that as a joke. They're fantastic. They're quick. You put them in the oven, they'll secure you if you've got nothing else that you can prepare. But try and look at those nutrients and try and get secured in pregnancy. And then remember, the minute you feel out of whack after you've had a baby, don't shut yourself up. Get help. Catch it early. Yeah. Don't be patronized. And if your doctor's not listening to you, I had a doctor tell me, your hair's falling out because you're stressed about it falling out. I wanted to punch her in the face. My ferritin was on the floor, right?
Yeah, right. So these other. I'm gonna hand this back over to Maria. Thank you guys. All these other questions, I'm so sorry we couldn't get to them, but we are gonna keep a list of them and we can always bump you out the answers too, but we're just fresh out of time and we have to hand it over. Thank you, my dear friends and dear colleagues. It was really wonderful. And yes, we'll do it again.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yes, so we're saving all the questions here for those that we didn't get to, so we will get back to you with the response. Thank you, Elrina, Dalia and Kathryn for tonight and for educating us so well on the importance of postnatal nutrition. And I'd like to thank also our hosts. So we have Sean and the team from Event 7 who have spent time with us beforehand, during, and will spend time with us afterwards to make sure that that the tech side of things and sound works. So thank you to Event 7. So a big thank you also to all of you attending. We have had large numbers attend and also others that are going to follow up afterwards. Hope you found it interesting and informative. If you want more information, contact us at help@mummymot.com. And these webinars we are running monthly now, and our next one is in February, and it's the 28th, and it's Let's Talk About Sex. And we will be looking at complex vulval pain as well. So we've got Dr. Lorraine Harrington from London Pain Clinic and Dee Hartman, a physical therapist specialized in pleasure and the pelvic floor. And those are our two speakers. So it will be very informative and very educational and medical. So do join us. You can click on the link here, the QR code, and you'll get all the details for February. So thank you once again to our speakers, to our hosts, and for all of you for rocking up here tonight. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you soon again at Mummy MOT.